I can bring him in.
Yeah. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Setter Tales podcast. I'm Thomas, and joined with me is Wade Kistner, of course. Looking pretty good. You look pretty snazzy with that nice dress up.
Kind of went all out for you tonight.
Yeah.
I knew you would. I knew you would be looking good coming from work. So
Coming right from work, you know.
I was in the field today though, so I didn't look quite like this at about noon today. I wanted to get Ruthie one last opportunity to run, before the season closes Friday down there at the preserve. And so I got her out, and she did 7 miles this morning.
That's good. You're embracing the GPS.
You notice how I know how far. I also know how far I went. That's the other.
I don't even
thing
look at
about
that part. I try to avoid see how much exercise.
Yeah, there's still a couple little things I need to. The only issue I had today with the GPS was I know there's a setting on there to make it less sensitive, so if you brush against the screen, it doesn't change, and I'd got to figure out how to do that because I was having a little bit of issue with that as it was kind of up against my jacket. But other than that, I'm starting to.
I'll show you some tricks.
Starting to get out there, So you got to be proud of me. You got to be proud of me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited for our guest tonight. I'll let you introduce him, but first we got to do a little housekeeping, pay the bills a little bit.
Yeah, I'll eat that.
Our podcast is brought to you by Kinetic Dog Food. You guys will. You guys should check it out. Pretty well get it about anywhere now. I think they're starting to get into all the tractor supplies and I've switched over since the last couple of years, and I'm seeing a very big difference in my dogs, and you've been on it for years, so it's you believe in the product, and we believe in it as both of us believe in it pretty much as far as you can get. So check it out. They got a great website. They have a Unleashed K9 TV that they sponsor. There's a lot of cool opportunities to see the different things they do with law enforcement dogs, hunting. Wade's got a pretty good story on there as well. So, plus one of our favorite places that you were at today is Highland Hunting in Riverside, Iowa.
That's right.
It's getting to the end of their season here on the 31st, which I think is Friday. So make sure you look up Ryan and the crew down there and get a hunt scheduled there for next year. It's great for getting your dog out before season, getting them in shape. They got fantastic birds, fantastic land. It's probably I've been to a few places like it, and I think that's probably got the most realistic. Like you're out, it's got great grasses, great cover, food plots. I mean, the birds are phenomenal. I mean, you feel like you're actually out hunting. You just know that there's going to be birds, and they do a great job there. So
yeah, and I spoke to Ryan this morning a little bit, and he's excited too for us to do another remote podcast down there this next season, and so we've been having some talks about that we're going to hopefully get in there with. There's a group that comes in from Ohio and have for many years, and we'll do a podcast one evening when that whole group's in there after a hunt, and that'll be pretty cool. And so we got some things that are going to be coming up next year, and like I said, the thing's growing, and thanks to everybody out there that's really supporting us. Keep subscribing, keep telling your friends, and to find us and watch our videos, and we'll keep making them. So
and keep sending us some questions into our new little series that we started, and we thank everybody for those for last week.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Well, I don't know when that's going to probably go out next week. That episode on points of view. Send those questions in, and that can be anything, and send those questions to Points of View, and that's through the settertails at protonmail.com, and you can find that on our Facebook page as well. Anyway.
Also, I want to add one thing to our viewers that did order some T-shirts. There was a snafu with ordering the product into our printer. They have since fixed that. So we will, as soon as they get those in, they're going to call me. I'm actually going to go down and watch them do our first printing of our first shirts. So we had a few made for ourselves just to kind of show off. But Iowa Upland Apparel is going to open another store here in probably a month or two. So we will, once I get that reopened, we'll put the order form back out, and maybe we'll have another design too.
I'll be looking for that. We want to see everybody rocking our shirts.
Yeah, I think a Points of View one would be kind of cool too.
Yeah, there you go.
So you you got to walk before you can run, correct?
Well, that's true. And we like to get guests on that are obviously they're hunters or they're vets or it has some connection to the upland world, but we always like to talk to people that have a little different perspective and hunt maybe different kinds of species of birds that you and I don't often get a chance to do. And our guest tonight has kind of taken his interest and his passion for hunting, and he's kind of turned that into a writing occupation that he does. I mean, he's you can see some of his articles in a lot of the major magazines and blogs, and Edgar Castillo is on with us tonight, and we're going to talk about how he first got involved in this crazy thing that we do called chasing birds all over the Midwest. And then we'll kind of get into some stories and some of the projects that he's doing right now and that everybody ought to check into. And so, Edgar, thanks for coming on tonight.
Well, thank both of you for having me on as a guest. I feel very privileged to be on Setter Tales podcast.
Well, we've been trying to hook up for a while, and we've had some our schedules have kind of varied, and we've been trying to get you on for a while, and so it's great that we finally made all that happen, and we got all the technical things out of the way, and so here we are. But just to kind of give the viewers and the listeners some background on yourself, I know that you spent several years in the military, and then kind of left that for a career in law enforcement, which obviously is close to my heart. But and then kind of after you left that, like I did, you've kind of immersed yourself, if you will, into the bird hunting and not only the hunting part of it, but recording it and putting on paper so that people that through your writings are really experiencing what you and I experience out there in the field a lot of times. And so, I guess as a place to start, what was your first kind of experience with bird hunting? Did that happen through a family member?
It actually happened through my father. And the first bird that I hunted or watched my father hunt was ducks.
And so he was a duck hunter. Did that, and where did that take you then? You kind of started going with him, and then that turned into like quail hunting and some other kind of bird hunting?
Exactly. My dad was actually started getting into deer hunting. And a funny story, our neighbor's the one that introduced my dad basically into hunting. My dad went out, and I'm not sure who shot the deer, but someone did. Tom, our neighbor, gave my dad a little bit of the venison, and my mom cooked it, and my dad became very ill. Went to the hospital, turned out that my dad is very allergic to venison.
Wow.
So from there, he stopped deer hunting or big game hunting and then just focused on birds. And that's where the waterfowl and duck hunting came. I used to tag along with him in the boat, and then from there we started getting into bird hunting, and I did that all throughout school, college, as well as when I came back from my first deployment.
And now, so I know you're kind of in the metro Kansas City area. So how far do you typically have to go to find a place to hunt? There's some public ground nearby, or how does that work for you?
All I hunt is public land, and I can get into birds, prairie chicken, quail, an hour and 35 minutes from my home here in the metro. For pheasants, I would have to drive a little bit farther, maybe an hour 45, 2 hours, maybe tops.
And that's one nice thing about Kansas. There's so much walk in there that the public, here in Iowa, you have public hunting and somebody you park there, but you might have to go 45 minutes to an hour to get to another spot. Kansas, sometimes you just turn the corner and there you go.
They've got several millions of acres, I think, spread out all across there. And so, and usually you can, like, when you were down there, you can kind of get a road map to where all those spots are. And some of them are better than others, obviously, but if you hunt them enough, you kind of know where the honey holes are, I suspect. So,
Yeah, Kansas has a very good public land access program. Not only their state lands, but their walking hunting, which is I think is like 1.2 million acres of walking that is sporadically spread out throughout the state. But for me here, I can get into walking literally within 30 minutes. Um, and then from there, just kind of venture out farther out, depending on what kind of species of birds you want to hunt.
now during the season, then how often are you in the field, or do you keep track of that, or?
Actually, I do now that I'm retired. I think this past season, I'd have to look at my journals, but I think this season I spent 60 some days out in the field. So I think that's pretty good. It's a little bit down from the previous year, which was my first full year after retirement.
And now I don't know if we talked about this, but do you have a dog you're hunting with, or what's your dog that you're taking with you when you hunt?
Actually, I do not have a dog,
Okay,
which
okay,
really surprises a lot of people. I did have a dog when I was growing up with my dad. I had another dog. Um, and then just because of my work, I was a law enforcement officer for 27 plus years. Because of my assignments and duties and responsibilities, it was just not conducive for me
right.
to have a dog, as well as I was also still in the Marine Corps. Um, so when I retired, my goal was to get a dog. I just have not have done that just because we've been traveling and doing a
Sure.
lot of stuff. My goal is to get a dog here. Um, but my buddies that I hunt with, there's a good 4 or 5 core members, and they've got a mixture of breeds from draughts to French Brittany's to GSPs.
So
Sounds like they need a setter in that group.
so well, that's sometimes that's the best of all of it is if you've got a good bunch of close buddies that you hunt with all the time that have dogs, then when the hunt's over, they're out there taking care of dogs while.
Well, I mean, our group was pretty tight. We all help out. Uh, Speaking of setters, I do have 2 buddies of mine that have English setters, and I've hunted behind them, and I really enjoy. They're very different compared to such like a Draught or a wire hair or a GSP.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to see the combination of all of them. And I've hunted behind most of them, and everybody has a preference, but it's kind of fun to see the multiple breeds when they're all hunting together sometimes, and that's kind of neat for people to see too. And we have clients that haven't experienced that before, but so I know that one of the big prizes for a lot of us, and I've never had a chance to harvest one, but down there on your scale of upland birds, would you say the prairie chicken is probably is the prairie chicken up there at top for a bird that if you get one of those that's a pretty good season if you're able to be in the right place in the limited areas where you can hunt those?
Yeah, I would say even from Kansans as well as out of staters coming in, I get a lot of questions regarding prairie chicken. So if you see one or a couple, obviously that's a good sign, a good omen. But for someone to shoot a prairie chicken, a wild prairie chicken, on public land, that is a feat in of itself. Just because they're so skittish and they're hard to find unless you know where to look.
Now, how do you hunt those exactly? I know like they're skittish birds, but they don't covey up like some of the other species, or do they?
Actually, they do. It's funny because depending on who you talk to, a lot of older hunters, they will tell you in the early season, so early September to October-ish, typically prairie chickens are hunted with big ranging dogs. You go out and walk a field. Obviously, you got to find the right habitat. But for the first couple months, that's how you hunt prairie chickens. Later in the season, that's where most of your older bird hunters will tell you that the only way, typically how they used to hunt and shoot them, is pass shooting, meaning you knew exactly where to go because you knew where they were um, loafing, and then from there, depending on where they would go and come from as far as a feed field, you would set up in between, kind of like doves and ducks,
Oh, really?
and then whether it was along the fence line or some hay bales, you would shoot them as they flew into the field to covey up for the night or go into and from a feed field.
I didn't know
I
that.
don't hunt that way. I actually walk them up
Yeah.
because I know where they're at typically, and we hunt them just as like we do in the early season.
So when you said you got to, and especially in the early season, your dog's got to kind of range out on them. Are you talking 200-300 yards, or how far you mean?
Early season, I've shot prairie chickens as close as 30 yards, but your landscape is going to determine that. If you're walking huge landscapes, if you're in the right habitat, knee-high grass, then they're the way they protect themselves is sight. So if it's open, they're going to see you coming. That's why they're so skittish. But early season birds, obviously born that year, you're going to be able to get a little bit closer to them, and that's where a good big ranging or mid ranging dog is going to come into play.
Yeah, that
You ever killed a prairie chicken?
I have actually never seen one in real life. That is on a goal. A lot of my friends go up into the sand hills, and they go up into the prairies and go. And I have a buddy. He goes out there, camps out in his truck, and well, I don't think he did the whole truck camping thing this year, and he said it was like 80, 90 degrees. So I'm not gonna do that again. But it seems like around that end of September when it's time, they go out there in droves and hunt the prairies, and that is a goal of mine to try that someday.
Yeah, I think we were at the governor's hunt a few years ago, and there was a gentleman there that I spoke to, and I thought this was the governor's hunt was out in Colby, Kansas, way out far in the northwest corner. But I thought he told me there was a county out there. You can't hunt them every place out there, but there's like one specific county where you could get on those birds, and he seemed to know where that was. And I always hope to connect up with him at some point. I never got a chance to, but yeah, it sounds like you kind of have to do your background and your research if you're going to go after one of those missions. I guess, or just by bad luck or good luck to stumble into one, I suppose. But I don't know. It'd be like probably like a turkey launching out of there. But
if they're not hunting prairie chicken, the other way that they actually get into chickens is just by accident. They're hunting quail or pheasants, and then by accident they're flushing chickens. A lot of people don't know that if you find a prairie chicken, it's a good idea to mark where you're at because you will typically find chickens in the same place, just like a quail, year after year after year, unless they are shot out or pressured off
interesting.
their leg.
Yeah, I have plenty of pins on my phone now for where I was in Kansas, for where I saw quail, and I was lucky enough to have a friend share a couple of them to kind of get me started to where, because I'd never done it before. So I kind of saw, oh, this is where they hang out. So then when I drove around to all these access areas, like that's the spot. And in the one spot that I marked that nobody you would think would pull into this place and hunt it, and there's like 3 cubbies on it. So I was like, all right, I got it. So that'll be the first place I hit when I hopefully get back out there next fall.
Hopefully the roads aren't muddy like they were.
Just gonna go with it.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that your journals, and it sounded. Have you always, when did that kind of become part of your routine to after the hunt? And and sometimes that takes some discipline. It does for me after the hunt to sit down and kind of, put some facts down, put some things that happened. This dog did that, or and So that sounds like that's something that you do on pretty regularly, if not every time you're out.
I actually started about 10 years ago before riding. And the reason I started was when my dad and I first started hunting, there were actually, I do not have a lot of photos with my dad hunting. And it was just, obviously, as you know, it's just something that was not done back then, or at least with my dad and I. We never gave it any thought. In the future, I would love to look back at some photos with my dad and I. Now I see the importance of taking a lot of photos, writing down a few notes here and there, so I could reflect back when I get older and I can't hunt anymore. So for me now, I just jot down a couple things from a hunt that stand out, and I use that when I write my articles, as well as just taking me back to, hey, this was a great hunt with my buddies or with my father.
And I've done a little bit of that. Uh, a dog that I recently lost, it was 14 years old, but I found some old journaling that I had done when he was in his first season. And it's kind of interesting, because you go back and you reread, some of the things that you had, put down about, how many birds you moved, or, a point, or, his first point or first retrieve or whatever it was. And as I did that with some of the dogs years ago, and unfortunately I wasn't disciplined to keep doing it as often as I should, but I'd like to kind of get back into that again. I think especially any young dog, but as you said, just documenting who was with you, what happened, and just sometimes just the fun things that happened during a hunt or after a hunt that is something that you want to remember, for later on, as you said. And obviously I'm closer to that day where I'm going to have to sit and read about it instead of doing it than you are. But yeah. And so that's kind of so then when you take that information and those notes, and then you kind of use that to build off on the articles. And so when did the writing and when did that come about, and how did you get interested in doing that?
Well, the writing actually came about by accident. I think, at least for me, when I was young, I would go with my dad to a local gun shop that we frequented quite a bit. And I remember there was always a bunch of magazines. And my first thing that I would do when we walked into the shop was I would go over to the magazines, flip through those, and just, look at different stories and articles and titles. And I always said, man, it would be really cool to someday have something in these magazines. Fast forward, 20, 30 years, and I was, uh, I would buy, upland related hunting magazines such as the Upland Almanac and Rough Grouse. And again, I had those same thoughts. And I just never thought that it would be possible. And anyway, so my both of my daughters encouraged me to write something up. I did. It was actually a review, and then that caused a company to reach out to me. I wrote a couple things for them, and that actually just opened the door, and it just catapulted me into different opportunities, and that's what started me into writing. And just doors started opening for me, and I've been doing it maybe 5 years now, and I've been very lucky and blessed to have the opportunity to share my stories.
So it turned into, so you got a job again then.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Well, that's great, because I have read some of your articles, and I enjoy them immensely, and have drawn some interest and passion in doing some of that myself. And like I said, it's fun to do, and it takes some time. And you got to be disciplined to sit down and be able to do it. But kudos to you for putting it on paper, because I think that's going to where the sport needs to stay alive. By writing the stories and people wanting to read those, and then find themselves with you in that field through your descriptions. And you do one of the best jobs of that than most people that I've read. So keep that up. And I know you got some projects going on now. What's the recent thing you're working on right now?
Well, I'm working on a bunch of little things, but I would say the biggest project I just finished a couple months ago was I had the opportunity to write um, a chapter for an upcoming book called A Mouthful of Feathers, which is going to be printed and distributed, I believe, early part of the summer. Right now, they're taking online orders for a special hardcover edition, but I was able to write a story about my father, our neighbor Tom, who into hunting, and I've been there a little bit, but um, I'm really excited about that just because the other authors that are contributing to the book is kind of a who's who regarding outdoor writers, and I don't think I'm anyone special at all, and so I was really felt like I had been really lucky to participate in this anthology of different writers.
Now I know that you hunt multiple species of birds, but I mean, do you have a kind of a bucket list of some things that you still want to do? Some certain kind of quail or other birds? I know you do a lot of quail in the Midwest, but is there something that's still on the list that you want to accomplish as
Well,
far as
I've
that
got
goes?
several on the list. It's just,
Let's talk about the list.
well, I mean, I, I need the mountain quail and the California/valley quail to complete the Quail Slam, which I'm going to Washington, Idaho area this upcoming season. So I'm pretty confident that I will check those two off. Hopefully,
Yeah,
definitely the valley and the California quail, but the mountain quail is going to be the difficult one. But a buddy of mine is pretty confident that we'll be at least get into them. Whether I can connect, that's going to be a different story. But
and explain
Chucker,
explain for everybody that's listening what that Grand Slam and what that means to some upland hunters. You know what you try to accomplish there. That people that
so
have
the
never heard
Quail
that term before.
Slam constitutes the bobwhite quail, the scale quail, the Gamble's quail, Mern's quail, and then you have the Valley/California quail. Depending on where you're at, that's the name that they use, and then the mountain quail. That would constitute a the Quail Slam for the United States.
And we had it's kind of interesting that you're mentioning that because we had Brian Mays on recently, and Brian's kind of going after that same thing, but he's trying to do it over a single dog. He's got a dog rebel that he's trying to make sure harvest those particular birds, all those different species over that individual dog, which is pretty neat. But I think he's getting closer all the time. I think so.
Takes a lot of time, a lot of hours in the vehicle.
Oh yeah, you gotta, because some of those species are a long way from here.
Yes, actually, the trick is finding a state or states that are in close proximity that has the most species in them that you can pursue. For example, Kansas, a lot of people don't know, actually has scale quail in the southwest corner. So for me, obviously, I shot the bobwhite quail years ago, but I also shot a scale quail hunting the Cimarron grasslands in Kansas. So I had those two checked off. And then when I got the opportunity to go to Arizona, I shot my Gambles and Merns, and then I shot the scale quail down there. But I had already had that checked off. So for me, I've got to find a state that has a mountain and the valley quail.
Well, I know they're in Idaho because we also had a gentleman on a few weeks ago who runs Gordon setters out there, Tom Loy, and I guess they have a lot of valley quail there. And
Yeah.
he said he had a particular field that was senior friendly that he thought I would be able to even maybe get one or two of those, because some of that terrain out there in Idaho is a little bit challenging. But yeah, it's kind of neat. I mean, I think people people that are really have a particular dog and want to travel and do some road time, can accomplish something like that. And it's just kind of an interesting goal to have. Some of us may never get there, but just the fact that I'd like to, I've never shot sharptails, and so that's something I want to do. And hopefully, we're talking about, Thomas and I both are talking about a Montana trip, perhaps early season, to try to do that. But
You got to get that new knee in there yet first.
I need a lot of new things before I can do that. But that's kind of where the GPS comes in too, is not only to find my dog, but maybe for Thomas to find me as well. And so, but yeah, that's pretty. It's always good stuff, and I'm sure that makes some really interesting articles, things to write about. Do you see any kind of, are they the different species of quail? Do you hunt them any different? I mean, obviously some of them I know tend to move more on the ground than others, so what can you tell us about kind of how that's different, in your approaches to hunting the different species of quail?
Well, bobwhite are gentleman birds, just as everyone describes them. They hold very well. I mean, on occasion, we'll get into a couple coveys of bobs that just don't cooperate, but for the most part, bobwhite quail are known throughout the country to be gentlemanly birds. Then you throw in scale quail and gambles, and those silly birds just run, and they just, they're kind of like a rooster.
Yeah.
They run, they zigzag, they double back. They're sneaky little birds. So for them, when you're hunting, your your tactics have got to change. I mean, you're going to be looking obviously for a certain habitat, but they like to run, and you've got to be able to follow them and have dogs that can relocate and pin them to get into birds.
Yeah, I was really amazed on how, I guess, I thought going down to Kansas, if I get into quail, this is a whole different ball game for me. But I mean, there's times I could kick into a covey and they just would look at you, or they wouldn't fly, and the dogs are like, I'm like, are you guys okay? And pretty soon, the dogs won't move, and then they just come blowing out of there, and that's just a sight to see, and it's fun. And going to different states, there's always hazards, and I think you watch videos or hear people talk about, oh, you go to Arizona, there's cliffs and there's this and that. I mean, there's definitely places you can avoid that to make it easier for somebody like me that's never done it, that takes a trip, that you could probably still get into the different species and feel safe for your own safety and your dog's safety. Would that be a true statement?
Definitely. I will tell you, the first time I went to Arizona, obviously I've never been there, but I used social media to get as much as information as I could, as well as reading other articles, making phone calls to biologists and game wardens to try to get as much intel as I could. I will tell you, the first time we went to Arizona, I landed a guy who had been following me, wanted to hook up. We met up for dinner. He was a Marine, I was a Marine, so we had that connection. So we hit it off quickly. He took us up to hunt gambles, scale, and merns. The first day for gambles, we were hunting in the mountains, and I thought we were going to be hunting a somewhat flat rolling desert. The videos that I watched on YouTube was completely different from where he took us. We were up in the mountains, on cliffs, on the sides of small little knolls, rocky, and it was some pretty tough hunting. Every year since that I've gone back, now 4 years, we go back to a different landscape, different type of terrain, to where it's somewhat semi-flat, pretty easy to navigate and walk through. But that first year, it blew my mind, just because I did not think it was going to be that difficult. And that's just like any other. I've been able to hunt ptarmigan up in Colorado and sage grouse, You're looking at all different types of habitats and terrain features and difficulties, some easy and some are not.
Yeah, I have that fear of a couple of my dogs just going flying off the mountain, just on a dead run, not paying attention, and kind of do the Wile E. Coyote, like they're still running, then they look down and they go down.
Well, there is some
And
places
me
probably
following
like
them.
that.
But
That and maybe the snakes and kind of situation too out there. Not even though that's it's not really as common as you would think it would be, but most of the guys out there that hunt dogs out there snake proof them. But yeah, so there's just some things you have to, as Edgar said, you just have to do the research and get enough information to know where to go and where not to go. But yeah, it'd be fun to try it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would vote for the flatter land than that mountain thing that he's describing that he went to first. I'm not sure I'd last too long on that, but yeah, that had to be a pretty good experience. Then, so did you get any birds that year when you were up there on the hill?
Oh, we shot a lot of birds.
Did you?
Now, again, like I said, the Gamble's quail. I asked Spencer, why did you take us here, as opposed to what me and my buddy, what we were thinking, what we were going to get into, and he wanted us to experience the different landscapes that these Gamble's quail could be found in, and they are the most widespread of all the quails in Arizona, I guess New Mexico, but I don't know because I didn't hunt New Mexico. But Arizona, you can find Gamble's in a variety of terrain and landscapes, from mountains to high desert to low desert. And we even got into Gamble's in somewhat close proximity to Merns. Whereas if you talk about Merns, they're in a specific type of habitat requirements. And then scale quail were sometimes intermixed with Gamble's as well. But again, that's doing your research, reaching out to some local people and picking their brain. That way you kind of know where to go and not where to go as far as dangers, what you guys were talking about, like snakes, as well as just terrain features to make sure that you're going to stay safe and not get into a situation where you can't get out of.
I had a buddy do that, and they got in the situation of where the terrain turned rough for the truck, in a brand new truck, and they actually bent the bumper over the tailgate.
You told me about that. Yeah,
And
that would be
had to go to a local
deal.
body shop to say get the dogs out of the truck.
That'd be a bad deal.
It was a bad deal. Brand new pickup too. Brand new.
That can be a little rough on tires out
I'd
there
say,
too, in
I'd
places.
say.
So I would guess if with the temperatures and things, and if you were going to quail hunt in Arizona, is that something you do a little later in the season because of the temperatures being going down, or is it? And how does that work? I mean, I'm guessing out there early on, like if you were hunting grouse in Montana and places early season, early October or even early in September, I think they do. I would guess it's still pretty warm down there in Arizona. Probably too much for a dog and maybe too much to be even trying to hunt. So I suspect, do you go a little later in the year then to do that?
We do. My buddy Spencer, I believe the Arizona quail season opens in October. I could be wrong. I think it does, at least for Gamble's and scale. I think Merns opens in second week of December. So the first year that we went, I was told later in the season. So we went at the very end of January. And for the last 4 years, we've gone at the end of January, the early part of February, because it's temperatures as well as that's just as far as availability wise, that just worked out better for us. But I know guys that have gone early in the season, but you're dealing with warmer temperatures, which means the possibility of running into snakes. And I don't want to do that. None of us want to do that. So we went later in the season just because of that.
Have you ever seen snakes on any of those hunts that you've done out there?
No. The first year we went to Arizona, that was one of my first questions to my buddy Spencer. And he assured us, because I was going to look at buying snake gaiters and appropriate gear to wear, and he told me, Edgar, you guys are coming down in mid-January, late January. You don't have to worry about snakes. I mean, I guess they could come out to maybe sun themselves. If you had maybe a week or two of warmer temperatures, that maybe the snakes would feel like they needed to come out. But I've gone for 4 years, and I've never even seen one. I've never even thought about, even for the dogs. Spencer's just said they just don't come out. They usually don't come out till like late mid March, maybe.
Better do it before March.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, and obviously you like taking a rooster down then, living in Kansas or near Kansas, I'm guessing, but and there's probably a lot of opportunity to do that. Up here, I got, kind of pheasant country for the most part. We don't see a lot of quail. Once in a while, we'll see a covey that you happen in a fence row, but not very often. And when you do, it's kind of a bonus. It really is. And
Yeah, that's the one upland bird that Iowa provides that I haven't gotten was the quail. So
yeah,
I did get a close encounter last year with one, and I wasn't ready for it.
well, most of the time we're surprised when they come up,
Yep.
and then you don't know what the hell has just happened, and by the time you do, they're gone. But
Yeah,
at
I
least
was
that's
watching the
what works
dogs
for
and
me.
not the terrain. And
Yeah,
he snuck out, and I guess that would call it. I almost have the Iowa slam, but partridge. We got some once in a while. We'll get some partridge up here if you find the right road ditch or go somewhere where somebody just harvested a field. You can pop around and there's still some coveys of them around. It's just nobody. If you see some, you don't tell anybody because they'll go clean them out and they like the road ditches, the brome grasses in the road ditches here. But they're up and down here, so that's kind of our Iowa slam.
yeah, seeing a quail.
Well, I'll tell you this: I will get you on chickens, and I was going to tell you, anytime you guys want to come down to Kansas, just let you on birds. But I have been wanting to get on a Iowa hunt, at least not shoot. I would love to shoot one, but if I can get into them, that'd be great. I've just heard a lot of stories. I've done some research, and I know there are hunts in Iowa. It's just like you mentioned, they're kind of an accidental type bird. You get into them as you're hunting quail or pheasant, but they are typically mostly on private land, from what I've been told.
Yeah, and every one I've actually shot was just walking back. It's usually you're walking back to the truck. In Iowa, we have mile sections, so you might run a waterway down if you're all by yourself, and then you just walk the road ditches back because it's legal to hunt road ditches in Iowa, and it always seems to be that's when the surprise happens.
So for our listeners out there from Iowa, there's a good challenge there where Edgar's looking for a place in Iowa to get an Iowa hun. And if you've got a spot, honey hole, where he can make that happen, let us know, and we'll get him up here, and we'll talk about it in a future podcast, and maybe document it in some other ways as well. But they're out there, and like Thomas said, usually when I've seen them, it's you're not expecting it, and it's kind of like what the hell, they're in a edge of a field, pick cornfields where I've usually encountered them before, but they're out there. I've had some people, landowners, tell me that they've got some. So.
Yeah, used to farm, so I'd be up in the combine, you'd see all sorts and think, oh, there's some huns. So, usually like, hey, I'm gonna bring the dogs up in the morning. Just ignore the fact that I'm not working right away, and can usually go. And the last place you saw them, they're usually there, but they move around so quickly because I could go back the next week and never see a one. And I don't, if they're feeding and.
We'll put the word out in our podcast listeners to see if we can find some opportunities for you to get you up here. That'd be pretty neat to get you up here. And I know you do go north because we were going to talk about another story. We mentioned that we had Brian on before, and he's a guide up in Minnesota for grouse. And when you're hunting grouse, you're in that thick, kind of dark, quiet, habitat up there, and
Yeah.
sometimes you hear things and whatever. And I guess Edgar recently was up there in Minnesota. You want to tell us a little bit about how that hunt went for you?
I will. Yeah, Brian, he runs a podcast, and I was a guest on his show, and he invited me to come up to Minnesota and bring a couple of my buddies. So we went last October and spent 3 days with Brian, camped, great place. He's such a great guy, very knowledgeable regarding grouse hunting. And so anyway, we went up there and he got us on the birds. We were able to shoot chocolate, one chocolate phase rough grouse, gray, and a red phase. But if you're referring to the strange encounters that our group came across, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, you not only got grouse, you kind of got a different kind of experience, I guess, that we have heard legends, or the legendary things that we've have heard of lore, of folklore, but you you got a little closer experience with that. Why don't you tell us how that all went down?
Uh, so, so the first day we arrived, I noticed as soon as we were heading into our camping spot, there happened to be several crossing signs along the roadway. I thought it was maybe just a local tourist ploy to get Bigfoot enthusiasts to come up to that part of the state, um, but didn't think anything other than that. Later that day, we ran into a couple local hunters, and the first thing they asked our group was if we had run into any uh, Bigfoot sightings, specifically footprints. We thought they were playing around with us. We just kind of went along with it, but after we spoke with them a little bit more, they were being serious. We just kind of let it go, and then later that day, our group we kind of split up. Brian went with two other guys. I went with a buddy of mine, Kyle, and I think we had gotten into a couple of rough grouse flushes, and I remember we stopped for a drink or just kind of check on it where we were at, and I started looking around, and we were in the middle of I don't know maybe 20, 30 trees that were about the thickness of a baseball bat, 30, 40 feet tall, and that at the 8 foot level, all these trees, about 20 of them, were all bent at the exact same spot in the same direction. And it was just weird. And so, anyway, we continued hunting, met back up with the group. Um, and then later that day, we split up again to two different groups. I was with two other guys, and we got into some tree knocking. And again, you have to know that we were in the middle of nowhere. We were about a mile from the Canadian border, miles from any civilization or anyone else. I mean, you would be out in the middle of the woods knocking on trees. And
Who would be?
from there, we just couldn't explain it. We got into some rough grouse, so we kind of ignored the 15 minutes of tree knocking, and then we walked back down the trail to be back up with Brian, and that's when we came across two different areas of a skunk smelling odor that came across our path in two different locations. And that's pretty much my tale with our unexplainable encounter with something up in the Minnesota North Woods.
What's Brian? What was Brian's take on it when you got back and reported your experience?
Well, within our group, uh, there were some skeptics. Um, I asked Brian the next day as we were driving around going to our next spot, and he told me that in that area, Bigfoot enthusiasts, there was a lot of unexplained sightings, and he had spoken to other people on the Minnesota side as well as the Wisconsin side that there are some bipedal large creatures running around the North Woods. Again, any footprints or anything, I saw the trees bent, which was weird. It was just unexplainable. The tree knocking and then the odor, I don't know.
That must have been the same. He must travel a long ways because my dad has that same experience down here in Iowa at night. He swears he thinks there's a Bigfoot. I give him grief about it all the time because he watches the show and everything. But maybe
it's
he's got
Littlefoot.
it could be a relative.
I
Maybe
don't know. I know I can only imagine how remote that is out there where you're describing, though, out there where there's just, no other human beings. And so, yeah, what is out there making noise and what would it be? But just the feeling of being out there would be pretty weird, I would think. And especially when you're at camp at night after having an experience like that during the daytime hunting. You'd probably have your head on a swivel a little bit, but, it's maybe the signs are there for a reason, I guess. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'd say makes a good article, and it sounds like it did. So you put that pen to paper on that one and let people understand kind of your experience up there. And so, yeah, I don't want to go anywhere and hunt where something can hunt me back. That's kind of one of my rules. And so. But that's I imagine knowing Brian, he probably just kind of thought that was funny. But he probably hears that and sees that quite frequently. But great story. Yeah, will you go back up there and hunt again?
Oh yes, definitely.
Not going to stop you now, huh?
No.
he's a highly trained individual.
Yes, he is.
So
yeah.
I'm sure he can figure out a couple ways to defend himself if Bigfoot did.
Yeah.
Did appear.
Well, I don't know if he's breaking trees off 8 foot in the air and they're the size of a baseball bat. I don't know. Yeah, it might be kind of challenging, but yeah, funny stuff. And we always talk about dog stories, and obviously, to kind of wrap things up, we always ask people their favorite dog story. And for you, maybe it was a dog from the past, or maybe something that you experienced with one of your buddy's dogs. But do you have a favorite story related to a dog that you were hunting with and something that happened or something that you experienced? We kind of like to always get everybody's perspective on that. Everybody seems to have something in mind or a story like that when we talk about it.
Well, I wish I had a story when we had our Brittany when I was growing up with my dad, but I don't. Nothing really stands out, but one dog in particular does, and it was a Vizsla. Her name was Staley, and most people that follow me on social media or that have read my articles will know which dog I'm talking about. A buddy of mine had a Vizsla. Her name was Staley, and so he was really busy. Even busier than I was as a police officer, especially during that time period, my assignment within the department that I worked for, the squad that I was assigned to. But anyway, when I did have some time to get out, my buddy always said, "Hey, Edgar, I need you to take Staley out because I can't." So for years, I would literally just go pick up Staley. And a lot of people thought she was my dog. And one story in particular, we were actually hunting prairie chickens early morning, um, heading to the location where we were going to split up and start hunting the Flint Hills. And I didn't feel very well. I thought something was kind of funny. I felt fine that morning, but there was just something that was just not right. We got to the location where we were going to split up, and Staley had been walking along with me. Again, a lot of people thought she was my dog just because when I was out with her, she listened to me. I could tell her to pretty much do anything or hunt a certain way, and she would do it. That's why a lot of people thought that she was my dog for a long time because I was posting pictures with her. But she was a little bit more clingy that morning to me, and I don't know why. I know why now, but before we split up, um, I literally just turned and I not really fainted, but I had a sharp pain in my side. And so, long story short, the buddies I was with, they had to call my wife. They literally had to carry me out, and Staley would not leave my side. I literally dropped to the ground in extreme pain, and she stayed with me the entire time. They were trying to figure out how they were going to get me out because where we were at, you can get a vehicle in there. Um, and so they ended up carrying me out, getting me back to the truck, and Staley would not leave my side. She ended up um, crawling into the back seat of my truck and staying with me until they drove me, and I ended up at the hospital. And turned out to be um, I had a hernia, um, and some other medical issues, but that story always stands out just because I don't know. She passed away a couple years later, and I grew very fond of her, and like she was my dog. So when she passed, I was really upset. But just I spent all those years taking her with me to Nebraska and hunting all over Kansas. She was a great dog, and I don't know, that story just always stands out for me.
It's like
So,
she kind
Kind of knew there was
yeah,
something going
she
on.
sensed something happening medically with you, and dogs sometimes have that sense. Obviously, a lot of
yeah,
them do, and so, well, that's yeah, a great story, and some, when we lose dogs, it's always difficult, especially great dogs that we've spent so much time in the field with, and so. But I tell you, we want to wrap up, but we do appreciate you taking your time. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast tonight. And again, thank you for your service, both the military service and your law enforcement service as well. And we will make sure that we'll put some connections up to some of the things that you've got going on for everybody out there. You get a chance, check out the book that Edgar mentioned earlier, and if we get a chance, maybe we'll see you down there for some prairie chicken hunting. So, thanks again.
well, yeah. Thank you very much for having me as a guest. Again, I don't think I have a very interesting story. I just, I've had an opportunity to share my experiences and my stories through the writing as well as on social media. And so I appreciate you having me on as a guest. And hopefully your listeners got something out of it. And, if they come to Kansas, I always have try to at least help out anyone who's interested in coming here, and, have them reach out to me, and I'll try to help them out as much as possible, as well as extending an invitation to both of you. If you guys ever want to come down, let me know, and I'll get it set up, and I will get you on board. I may blindfold you to take you where my prairie chicken
You
spots
won't,
are,
you
but
won't let us
we
put those
both got
waypoints in.
GPS now,
Yeah.
No, but that's to wrap up, that's one of the
Yeah.
things that we do, we enjoy with the podcasts and interviewing guys like yourself, is that there's that camaraderie of hunting. And I don't think we haven't had one guest said, "Hey, come down, I'll take you hunting." And obviously we're going to extend that up to you, and we're not that far apart. So
nope.
we can, I think we can accomplish that sometime.
Yeah. So thanks again. We appreciate it. And we will stay in touch, and we'll follow some of your writings. And, as far as the everybody else goes, keep subscribing. Make sure that you send us some questions for our other episodes that we're doing on points of view. And as my friend here often says,
Keep their nose in the wind.
and take somebody hunting.